If this were a real band, they might be called the Unimageables. There'd be a problem, however. Every rock band is unimageable. Well, inaccurately imageable. And it's not just rock bands, but I'll stick with guitars, bass, drums, and maybe keyboards for today. Oh, and lead vocals. Can't forget the lead vocalist. They tend to get very stroppy if you do. So, what do I mean by imaging? Stereo imaging, if you like. Soundstage, well, that's a bit more vague and I might cover it in a future video. But stereo imaging. Okay, one of the principles of stereo is that it should be possible to record an acoustic ensemble, an orchestra perhaps, or a jazz band. And when you listen back on your audiophile grade system in your sonically tuned listening room, you should be able to pinpoint the position of each instrument from left to right. Fully left, fully right. Half left, centre, half right. Anywhere in between. You don't have to record this way. You can record any way you like and have some kind of spatial mush. But correct imaging is my topic for today. So, let's imagine it. Maybe a jazz trio. Oscar Peterson on piano on the left. Keith Moon on drums in the centre. Bootsy Collins on bass on the right. Wouldn't you like to hear that? OK, so Bootsy needs his amp, but there's no problem with that. For recording, the speaker of an electric instrument can be considered in just the same way as an acoustic sound source, which it is. One way to record this is to give each instrument close mics. The drums can have multiple mics but mixed to sound natural. On top of the close mics, you might have a distant, spaced pair of ambience microphones to add just a touch of atmosphere. For mixing, you could pan the piano half left, or maybe a bit more, the bass half right, again, maybe a bit more. And the drums, well, you don't want them to be a point source, so you'll give them a bit of space left and right around the centre. All of this can be done with the panpots of the mixing console. The ambience mics will be panned fully left and fully right, and mixed in just a fraction. You know, you can play a recording like this on your system or your headphones, and it will sound great. Each instrument will have its own place in the stereo image, and you can easily hear it as such. It won't sound exactly like it did live because a recording never can. And in any case, two of the musicians would need to be reincarnated. Maybe give it a year or two, and AI will be able to do that, at least virtually. An orchestra is just the same thing on a bigger scale. Strings, woodwinds, brass and percussion, all with their own places across the actual stage, and with their own corresponding places across the stereo image. Now, let's get back to that rock band, the Unimageables. That's Roy Rogers with a trigger warning. Do you get it? You're old. But yes, a warning. I'm about to have an opinion, and I know where that has gotten me in the past. Rock PA is all wrong. Yes, let me say that again. PA for rock bands is all wrong, and it has been since some point in the 1970s. It's no one's fault. It just kind of has to be the way it is. Or to put it another way, the way it is an inevitable compromise. Let's go back to the 1960s. Or I could even say to the kind of working men's club bands I played in the late 70s, early 80s. So yes, we have an electric guitar, maybe two, a bass, drums and maybe keyboards. The thing is that in a small venue, it's perfectly possible for each instrument to have its own amplification. The drums are loud enough anyway, and the vocalist will need their own PA, which could be two column speakers at the sides of the stage. It's almost like an acoustic ensemble because, as I said earlier, each loudspeaker can be treated as a sound source, just like an acoustic instrument. The only difference here is that the vocals come from 2 points in space and they sound amplified, not realistic. Yes, there could be a signal speaker for the vocals, but that creates other problems that I'll skip for now. Now, take this to a larger venue, and what do we have? Well, the amplifiers are not loud enough, and the drums now need to be amplified. And the vocals, well, they're pretty much the same as they were before. Where PA system design went over time was to have two mighty great stacks of speakers at the sides of the stage, and a mixing console all controlled by one front-of-house engineer. What's wrong then? The engineer can use his or her panpots to position instruments in the speakers according to where they're positioned on stage. in a very similar way to my jazz trio recording example earlier. Yes, this is absolutely possible, but there's a problem, and this is a problem in theatre and cinema too. Suppose, for instance, Este Haim is gurning from the right side of the stage from the audience's perspective. So the front-of-house engineer positions her there in the stereo image. All it needs is the Panpot. Easy. This will sound great for anyone in the audience halfway between left or right, or thereabouts, but people close to the stage on the right will be blasted out with bass, and people close to the stage on the left will hardly hear it. So that's one example of a real-world problem. Another is temptation, and we all know about that in the real world. So the keyboard player's favourite synthesizer has a stereo output. How easy is it just to pan it hard left and hard right to get that lovely, spacious sound? Yes, it may sound great, but it's taken the instrument from a point in space to a kind of wraparound sound that's totally unnatural. Now, I'll be the first, well, the second, to say that whatever sounds good is good, and a natural sound isn't necessarily what the listening public wants. But my point is that for a rock band, there isn't any such thing as a natural sound, at least not since the olden days of unamplified drums and a PA just for the vocals. And the main consequence of this is that there's no reference point for stereo imaging. Well, not unless the auditorium sound is the reference point. So when the unimageables go into the recording studio, the producer and engineer might ask, "What do you want to sound like?" But if their response is, "like we do live," then the end result is not going to be the sound of a rock band, particularly in the sense of stereo imaging. I'd go further and ask whether it's really in the spirit of rock for the sound of a band to be defined in the studio. Surely it's live that matters. But then, live sound has all of the problems I've just covered. Do I have the answers? Well, I could say, just forget about it and create whatever spatial mush sounds good. But what about the audiophiles who want to achieve what they feel ought to be the genuine rock sound in their listening room? 2 questions for commenters. One, I think the most important question is, does this matter? And I think that anyone who cares about music and audio should care whether it matters or not. And, after thought, maybe the conclusion is that, well, it doesn't. But I don't think it's right to say it doesn't matter just because you don't care. What do you think? 2, if you do think this matters, do you have any solutions? One possibly would be for each instrument to have its own PA. It isn't uncommon to do this for vocals. But could it be taken to a more granular level? Any other solutions? Come on, commenters. I know you're going to have great perspectives and great ideas in the search for the genuine rock band sound. See you soon.
Hi, Debbie. I feel as though I've been cooped up in a dark place for a long time.
Yes, Betty. He hasn't been making videos lately. He fell off his bike. He broke 7 ribs, 3 of them in 2 places, and had a collapsed lung.
Ouch!
But he's back now.
You know, Debbie, if he'd let us out before he fell off his bike, we could have had the show to ourselves.
Think again, ladies.